how do we end up being here tonight? It's an interesting story. I grew up obviously in northern New South Wales in Glen Innes, so I grew up in New England region. I spent most of my life here actually, played rugby league in New England and went to school here. And most of my family is still here, and I visit and I come back to New England all the time. I have half a dozen farms as well, so I'm someone that's actually invested heavily in New England myself. And that's because I believe in the rural industry and the future of what New England has to offer. The reason we're here is because I think this country has lost its way. I think, particularly in the last 6 years, we've gone through one of the biggest commodity booms in the history of this country, and yet we have very little to show for it. We have a country that's in $250 billion in debt, despite this current government inherits a surplus. We have a country that continues to invent new taxes, to tax more from you, despite you being given plenty as a taxpayer, giving a lot of work and paying a lot of tax, but you're getting less and less for the bargain, because it's very easy for people in politics or certain sides of government to spend other people's money. Is that true? Those who own a business, etc., know it's very easy for other people to spend your money when really our money should be respected as taxpayers. And if we continue on this current path of this current government, it would not take many more years to see Australia become a bankrupted nation, a nation that was one of the richest countries on the planet, that simply squandered one of the greatest commodity booms in the history of the planet. And that's sad in some ways, but I believe we can change direction, we can change course. And I know I'm speaking to the converted in New England, that you want to see change. That's my belief. I've been out the last 3 days, in Glen Innes and Armidale. We've spoke the last 2 nights, and here today in Tamworth, and talking to the locals, and most people are quite positive about change. And tonight, I guess generally we don't talk about politics, but tonight is a political event, so we can certainly talk about politics. I'll share my opinion and my views on things as well, but tonight's not about that. I really want to find out, one of the reasons I'm spending time is to really find out what are some of the local issues. We're going to talk about national issues as well, as far as how we can change this country, because a lot of those national issues really relate at a local level as well. Such as improved education, improved health services, improved roads and infrastructure, more jobs. And they relate to us wherever we are in Australia. So what I want to find out and give you a chance, obviously the first part of this presentation, I will share with you, I guess, a blueprint that at 21st Century Australia we've come up with, a 25-point blueprint to turn this country around and head it in a direction where all Australians can benefit in the abundance and prosperity that this rich nation has to offer everyone. If only we can learn to manage our money and our fiscal responsibility, then we can all benefit and have a much greater future, not only just for ourselves, but our children and our grandchildren in the future. Tonight we're going to be talking about a lot of common sense, strategic, intelligent things. Unfortunately, though, in this country, you might recognise that common sense is a little bit uncommon, especially in Canberra. There seems to be a great lack of common sense. So tonight, anything I talk about is common sense, and you can decide upon that if you agree with that. But they're pretty sound, down-to-earth solutions that can make a change, will make a change, if enough Australian voters, enough individuals, starting with this electorate, but right around the country, are prepared to support that change. Nothing changes if nothing changes, but most people are fed up with the lack of change. And I guess we have to have enough pain, enough challenges before we go, enough is enough. We hit a threshold and say we're going to move in a different direction. And I'm quite excited about what is possible when you can unite a country, unite a region, people working together to make the country what it can be. And that's why I'm excited. That's why I'm willing to put my time, money, and energy into the New England electorate and into this country to see it head in the direction that it deserves to head. So I'm really going to open up and also have the chance, only in the second half of tonight's presentation, for you to ask any questions that you have. Unlike many politicians, I have no issue, because I'm not a politician, I have no issue in answering questions. If you see some of the current politicians, it's very hard to get a straight answer out of them. They're very skilled at ducking and weaving the actual questions, which is frustrating to voters as well. Why can't they just be more transparent, more honest, and tell us how it is? We don't need things sugar-coated or twisted or manipulated in a way we shouldn't be taken for fools, because we're not. One thing that I commend you in New England is that New England is a very historic electorate, if you don't realise that. It was one of the founding electorates when the country was created. But living in New England, you might notice that, when you see it from outside, is that New England gets most of the media attention. out of any single electorate in this country. New England is the one that the media focus on the most, and particularly because there's quite a tussle coming up with the September election with your beloved Tony Windsor and Barnaby Joyce, etc. People like to see a bit of a stoush. But there is a lot of tension on New England. One of the reasons is New England has a great demographic of voters. And I was impressed the last few nights, just the quality of people showing up and the quality of voters. And I guess it's a demographic of what makes up New England, the sort of people that are here, that are very good, honest, hard-working people, and actually can make intelligent choices if they're not betrayed or misled or deceived. But tonight, let me run through, a 25-point plan that we have for Australia, and how that will, and also go in after that into specifics of how we feel that can help the New England electorate, and then we'd love your feedback. We'll open up for questions. They have been doing some polls already. This Armadale Express poll, which was launched only 2 days after I announced in the beginning of April that I'd be running, and already there's a large amount of support. I've been walking around the streets the last few days, and people that have never met me before have heard of that we are coming to contest here, and most people have been very positive. They want to see some more competition. They want to see some fresh faces. So it's been very supportive of that, because I think two major parties are sometimes a little bit arrogant and are not listening to voters. They just take for granted, because of the two major parties, that they're going to get voters. And I think they're unprepared for the groundswell opportunity there is if a legitimate third party can get up in this country, and with the use of technology and social media that's disrupting so many other industries, I think the political industry can be disrupted and turned on its head, and they're completely unprepared for that. And that certainly is our intention if we can garner enough support. Let's look at some of the key issues. Let me run through these as quickly as I can, and then we'll take some questions. 21st Century Australia is not just about a political party, it's an entire movement. The only way to change this country is we have to update our political system. It was designed in the 19th century, 200 years ago. It's hopelessly outdated and is no longer serving the voters' interests. It can be easily manipulated and hijacked, as we've seen with the current government. It's lost its way, it's lost its true values, even if you're a Labor supporter. I know many die-hard Labor supporters that will not vote for Labor come September. They're so disenfranchised. If you can't keep your hardcore supporters happy, then you really are heading in the wrong direction. It can be hijacked, and unfortunately our current government is hijacked by minority interests, and that's a challenge. We need to change that. Some of our solutions that we're proposing is that voters should be able to vote direct on major policy. Let's give you an example. Julia Gillard, before she was elected in 2010, said there'd be no what tax? No carbon tax. When she was elected, she changed her mind or gave us a carbon tax. That annoys voters, because voters, the majority, were against it. I remember when John Howard was in power, I was opposing his view on invasion of Iraq. Anyone that had done any research was aware that the lie that was based on misinformation, it wasn't accurate, the reasons they invaded Iraq, and we found that out later. But I agreed with a lot of his economic policies. So how do you vote? If you vote for that particular party, they take a mandate to introduce all their policies, but we only like perhaps some of their policies, not all of them. So voters really don't get a clear indication. And that way you're not getting an accurate change in the country. Why can't you be able to vote with technology today that can prevent fraudulent voting that's available with technology, that you should be able to vote on major policy? Why should the politicians, who even they say they're going to support a policy that you vote for, then change their mind? Major policy voters should be able to vote on. Do we want a carbon tax, yes or no? Do we want a mining tax, yes or no? Do we want to spend 50, 60 billion on a national broadband network, or do we want one that can be built quicker and faster and for less? So let the voters have the power on major policy. Minor policy, let the politicians deal with the minor policies, because they're better at dealing with minor things than major things, okay? So I believe we would no longer need compulsory voting to force people to vote if you could vote on major policy, because I believe Australian voters would want to vote on major policy because they're empowered to have a direct say in the running of the country, and I believe that's what true democracy is about. The other thing that we would do, I think, which is critical, is number two, we want to remove government spending from the hands of politicians. Julie Gillard, Wayne Swan, what criteria, what skill set do they really have to manage a $1.6 billion economy, to manage $360 billion in tax? They have no skill set for that. They've never been qualified at any part in their career to manage that. So we're allowing inept politicians to manage our taxpayers' money. And we know they're going to use it for political bribery. We know they're not going to treat it as their own, they're going to waste it. We've seen that. We need a system where government spending is put in the hands of an independent board, just like interest rates are set independently of the Treasurer for very good reason. We need government spending set independently of the inept politicians. So the best business brains, finance brains in the country, and those representative of the community interests are appointed to this board, and they oversee and protect your taxpayers' money. Would that reduce the amount of wastage? Would that reduce the amount of excessive debt? I would say absolutely yes. Why does BHP, these large companies, have independent boards? They have independent boards for very good reasons. It's sound policy to represent shareholders' interests. If BHP was able to, if the corrupt unions were able to get control of BHP, get control of their bank account, how long would it take for them to destroy a company as profitable and as prosperous as BHP? Would it take 20 years, 10 years, 5 years? It wouldn't take very long at all. And we have this same analogy in Australian politics where we have unions that have been corrupted, they've got control of our bank account of taxpayers' money, control of our current government, and within 5 or 6 years, they've turned a country that was heading for prosperity into a country that's heading for financial failure in a short period of time. And it's appalling. My grandfather, who, I'm fifth generation Australian, and my parents and my grandparents and great-grandparents have been farmers in the New England electorate. I remember him saying when I was a kid, he said, "Jamie, never let the fox guard the hen house." You may have heard that saying before. We can't let the fox guard the hen house. People such as inept politicians guard the money. We need to protect it, and that alone would make a very big difference. 3, education. I've been an educator for 15 years now. I've educated over 500,000 people from over 17 different countries. It's a passion of mine. We have an outdated education system designed in the 19th century in the industrialisation era. We're now in the 21st century information age. The world has changed. I was asked today on radio in Tamworth, what do I think of the Gonski? It's just been approved by the Premier. And I said, look, it's a complete waste of money. Pouring billions of dollars into an outdated, flawed education system is not going to improve the education system. Let me prove my point. This current government has increased education expenditure by 40% since they come to power. Has the quality of education in New England, the quality of education in this country improved by 40%? I very much doubt it. Has improved by 1%. I very much doubt it's gone backwards. We're going backwards in terms of global standards of education. You can't fix a flawed education system by pouring billions of dollars into something that's flawed and outdated. You fix it by changing the education system to a modern day 21st century education system that's based on real life results. That's practical, common sense, and strategic. That's designed for today's world, not designed for a world that no longer exists. Am I making sense? And that is simple ways we can deliver a modern day 21st century education within 12 months or less in this country, in this region. And we want to use this region as the benchmark that can be replicated Australia-wide. I think we can offer a lot to New England. New England can become the benchmark, the success story of the country. And then other regions can model that and copy what is done here. We don't need 1 extra cent of revenue to deliver a better education. And we can pay teachers more. Educators, teachers should be one of the most significant roles in society. If we don't value teachers and we don't get better quality teachers and train our teachers more and pay them more, then we're not valuing education. Other nations that are steaming ahead of us value education. Education leads to prosperity and abundance. We need to upskill Australian workers and we need to provide a better education for our students. And we can do that without 1 extra cent of revenue. It's common sense, it's available now, and with technology, we can deliver that in a short period of time. Number 4, why don't we have a sovereign wealth fund? You've heard the saying, we should save for a rainy day, we should have an economic buffer. I'm not the only one that suggests this. Leading economists have wanted this. And Norway, Dubai, they all have large sovereign wealth funds. They know eventually when the oil runs out, they need to have some money aside. When our commodities boom drops down, which it already is dropping down, courtesy of this government speeding that up, is that we should have put some money aside. It's appalling that we have a massive deficit. The money should have been put aside to protect us against these economic buffers. If you ask the current government about a sovereign wealth fund, and they'll say, nah, we don't believe it, they don't support it. Because why? They need to fill their budget black holes. They don't want money put aside. They would never support such fiscal responsibility. It's not in their DNA. Why are we surprised? Why are we surprised? I'm sure you're not surprised at this current government that they know how to spend. They know how to increase taxes. They know how to stuff up basically every policy they've thought of. I mean, we're a joke when you look at our current government overseas. You travel overseas a lot, speak to leaders around the world. Our current Prime Minister, unfortunately, is seen as a joke, especially by the Chinese. And it's embarrassing. I'm a proud Australian, but it's an embarrassment. Sovereign Wealth Fund also, what is the current government doing about helping lower the Australian dollar, help the farmers in New England, help the farmers around Australia, help many industries that are suffering from a high Australian dollar? Absolutely nothing. Sovereign Wealth Fund will not, will help. It's not the only thing you can do, but it's one way to help lower the Australian dollar. If you're transferring a lot of savings aside into a sovereign wealth fund, money going overseas, it can help lower the Australian dollar. Will that be beneficial to New England farmers and the rural industry? Absolutely. So at least it's one way to consider potentially helping rural industry. Number 5, a review of state governments. I know this one is a controversial one. A lot of people support it. A lot of people, you're not really sure yet. State governments. 23 million people in Australia. And the UK has 60 million people. How many levels of government does the UK have? Take a guess, it's 2. We have 3 levels of government. We are the most over-governed, regulated in any state in the history of the planet. We have way too many regulations. Am I saying let's get rid of state governments? I'm saying let's review it. The outcome here is, why do we have education, healthcare, transport, infrastructure duplicated in each state? Why don't we have one national framework? We're on country, right? State governments have delivered rail networks that can't even connect at the border. New England to through Stanthorpe, they're different gauges. That's what state governments deliver. Can you believe that in this country? They were designed at a time that no longer exists. If we were designing Australia now, would we deliver state governments? Would we design it as the most productive way? We wouldn't. So what I'm suggesting, if we can cut out this replication and duplication, state, federal, local, and eliminate one level of government, then we could save billions. If we can cut out the duplication without eliminating state governments, then great, we don't need to eliminate them. The outcome is to save billions per month. That's the outcome. But certainly would be reviewed. If they were eliminated, we'd appoint state-appointed ministers to still protect our state interests. So that certainly should be up for review. Number 6, review the carbon tax. Now, there's a lot of debate about this, but for those who want to see a healthy environment, we support a healthy environment and a healthy economy. I was asked today on radio, was I a greenie? And I said, look, I grew up on a farm. I'm a farmer. What do you think? I'm not a greenie, but I'm not against the environment. We believe that we should have a healthy environment and a healthy economy. The two must work together. There's no point being idealistic and saying, well, let's just have everything our extreme greens, which they are. If they were more down the middle, that achieve more outcomes. Being extreme either way is not going to, you're going to be idealistic. That's not going to change. We need to be realistic. Is that true? What is possible? How do we have an improved environment and look after the environment by having a healthy economy at the same time? To me, it's common sense. Review the carbon tax. Why? It has not helped the environment. I mean, it's a cost. It's a tax, basically. It's a revenue-generating exercise. Well, it was meant to be, by the way. They've already spent the money they intended raising from it, and now they're not going to raise much because the price of carbon, and they've set it, what, $23 a tonne? What's it currently trading at in Europe right now? Can anyone tell me? $3. It was $3.23 last time I checked. It's probably dropped even lower now. It's just insane. It's a joke. We believe that the policy should be this, that 100% of proceeds from a carbon tax should go direct to renewable energy. So what we would suggest, let's say we set it at $2 or $3, you incentivize carbon polluters rather than penalise them. You say to the big carbon polluters, here's your choice. You've got to put $2 or $3 aside, whatever the market value will be, as it varies, per tonne, into your own, you can put it into your own renewable energies fund. It will be audited by the government, it has to abide by the regulations. You put it into your own fund, and one day they might, 100% has to go into helping the environment. One day they might even be able to turn it into a profit-making division, which will also help the environment. Or they have to put it into a government-approved renewable energy fund. The point is 100% of proceeds would go to helping the environment, not into filling budget black holes by a government that wants to spend your money before they even collect it. Number 7, review the mining tax. This current government's got, okay, we need money desperately. Let's go and raid the only golden goose that's laying the egg. Let's attack the mining industry. Let's attack the wealth creators of this country. Can we believe the world's greatest treasure, well, world's greatest treasure according to himself, is that here we have a treasurer of a rich capitalistic society attacking the very mining billionaires, the very people who have created most of the wealth that funds his salary, creating class warfare, dividing the nation, deliberately trying to deceive the poor low-income earners, the low-income workers, deceive them and turn them against the rich or the middle class. Create class warfare is a desperate last-minute bid to buy votes. That is the worst form of politics there is. But that's about all this current government knows. They are so desperate they will do anything to try and fool voters into voting for them. Why don't they just speak the truth? Why attack an industry that's created such fortune for this country? $130 billion the mining industry has paid in taxes since year 2000. I think they are contributing. The mining tax has damaged the mining industry significantly, and how much money has it raised? Bugger all. They've already spent the billions they thought they'd raised from it. It didn't raise it, but it damages internationally. A lot of mining projects are no longer going ahead in this country, are going to other countries because of this. So we've achieved nothing other than damage our own economy, trying to be greedy and stealing money from a productive industry. Now, some people argue, in particular socialists in this country, that the minerals belong to all of us. Well, that sounds like a sound argument, but we all know, let's think about this. How much are minerals worth, and iron ore, etc., in the ground? What are they worth to all Australians in the ground? Absolutely nothing. They pay no tax, they create no jobs. They are worth nothing in the ground. They're only worth something when the entrepreneurs that invest decades in this country and risk everything to try and create a company to get them out and ship them to China and India, etc. That's adding value to society, and that creates jobs and creates wealth for everyone to share. And the entrepreneurs are the last to be paid. Sure, they make good profits. It only can make good profits if they've added massive value to this country. So yes, we suggest we review the mining tax. Yes, we may want to have a small federal royalty tax that's simple to implement, but doesn't cost the mining industry very much. But only on the condition 100% of those proceeds go to a sovereign wealth fund or an infrastructure fund. Otherwise, we don't need a mining tax. It should not go to fill budget black holes because the current government can't spell the word fiscal responsibility. Number 8. Here's a unique one. I'm not the only one that suggested this. I wrote a book a year ago called 101 Ways to Improve Australia. It's available to every Australian for free. If you go to 21stcenturyaustralia.com.au, you can download that book. You can also download our detailed policy document. You can watch videos on a lot of these topics. All the information is there. You can share it with your friends, get feedback, see what they think. See, is this a better option than your current government in Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan, etc.? Does this make sense? And is this innovative, and can this make a difference to the country? Turn Australia Post into a bank. Why do we want that? 1, it'll improve regional banking services. 2, we need a 5th bank. The top 4 banks control over 80% of the mortgage market in this country. A 5th bank could add competition to that, could lower interest rates, and also Australia Post as a bank could deliver lower interest rates, discounted interest rates to Australian taxpayers, and so it should. So, and that's quite possible to do that. We don't need money to do that. We just need innovation. The Kiwis did it with Kiwi Bank, and if the Kiwis can do it, can Australians do it? Yes or no? We want to hope so. No offence to our Kiwi friends. Number 9, review the power of unions. We don't have a Labor Party anymore in this country. We have a union party, and a corrupted union party at that. If you want to research this, you can see it. It's appalling what they've done to this country out of sheer greed. Sheer greed of destroying a great country. Here's what we want to do with unions. I believe in honest unions. Australia needs honest unions to look after honest workers. We don't need corrupt unions. The way to make them honest, move them under the power of the ASIC, the Australian Securities Investment Commission. So the unions that routinely attack businesses and enterprises in this country, let's put them under the same laws as business. That way, if any more of this illegal activity, secret slush funds, this abuse of union members' money, go straight to jail, do not pass go. At the moment, there are so many crooks involved, people that have broken the law in these union factions that are dictating to our country, yet they think they're above the law because this current government won't investigate them and allow them to get through. There should be no more illegal behaviour. We should demand honest unions to support our workers in this country. There is no place for corrupted unions, and this will clean them up, and make sure them act with transparency and honesty. Also, they should have to pay tax. Why should you have to pay tax and unions not pay tax? Let them pay tax. That way we'll have, and also it should be limited to their ability to interfere with the political process. Democracy is not designed for those with vested minority interests to interfere with it. Democracy is about the majority should rule. That's my belief, and that's the way it should be. And we return power back to the voters, that's the way that it will be, away from these minority interests that just want to pocket the billions. People don't realise, they hear the Craig Thompson affair, they think, well, that's what unionism does and the corruption there. That's the tip of the iceberg. What people don't realise, we are paying 30% more to construct buildings in this country because unions had their union building companies and they're in pally together, and they jump up the construction prices by 30%. They are pocketing billions of dollars a month. That's how they can fund majority of the politicians on one side of government. They have billions of dollars that's ripped out of this economy that does not belong to them, that belongs to Australian taxpayers. It's daylight robbery, and it's happening under the nose of most Australians. If you do some research on it, you'll be appalled at how they're getting away with it, and that's why they're so funded. That's why recently, if you notice, Kevin Rudd was going to make a comeback. They thought he had the support. The unions don't like Kevin Rudd. They hate Kevin Rudd. They needed Kevin Rudd to get into power. As soon as they got him into power, they shafted him and put Gillard, the puppet, because she's in bed with the corrupt unions, into power. Kevin Rudd was going to make a comeback, but they threatened the MPs that were going to support Kevin Rudd. If they do, they threaten them. Is that democracy? It's not democracy. We've got a government that's been led astray by vested interests. Need I say more? Number 10, let's look at innovative ways to raise tax revenue. Here's a way to raise an extra $15 to $30 billion a year in extra revenue without hurting Australian taxpayers. It's money in our pocket. If we're going to create taxes, let's not create taxes that hurt Australian taxpayers. Let's create taxes where we can generate revenue from overseas, people wanting to come here. There's 200,000 immigrants arrived in Australia last year. Immigrants are good for a country. I'm supportive of 457 visas. We need immigrants in this country, particularly skilled immigrants. Skilled immigrants add a lot of value. They've built many countries and they've added a lot of value to this country. One thing about being in New England is that growing up on a farm is that I adopt, having a good work ethic, it served me well in being successful in business because I worked hard on the farm. It's very similar to an immigrant mentality growing up on a farm because you learn how to work hard. Immigrants come to this country, they generally know how to work hard. So I'm all for immigrants, but we have a wonderful country here that people want to come to. We can charge for visas to come here. Wealthy people that want to come here, they're often Chinese will have to invest $5 million, etc. We can charge visa fees. A lot of people are happy to pay a visa fee to come here. Those who can't afford it up front but add value to our country can pay it off over time, over the 3 to 5 years of being here in a HEC-style system. We're talking $15 to $30 billion we could raise per annum, extra tax revenue. What could we do with that money? We could do a lot with that. How are we going to fund a lot of our policies? One, we're going to eliminate wastage, and two, we're going to create innovative ways to generate extra revenue that don't hurt Australians. Let's look at number 11 quickly. Removal of payroll tax or reduction of payroll tax for smaller businesses. Payroll tax is a disincentive to employ people. If you employ more than 10 people in a company, you're generally paying payroll tax, 5 or 6%. Let's get rid of it or reduce it for small to medium businesses. Number 12 is a controversial one. We have a massive health liability. When we talk about health services, we have a massive health liability coming from people that have poor diets, drink too much alcohol, and smoke cigarettes. Now, of course, we're not going to ban people from smoking cigarettes. That would start a riot. But what we're suggesting, and this has been tested overseas, in places like Singapore, they want to bring this in, but also a lot of professors support this as well, a phase-out strategy that children born after the year 2000 that would generally phase out them being able to be sold deadly products such as cigarettes. We know they're deadly. That way, obviously everyone would still, children in the future still be able to smoke if they wanted to. They'd have that human right. We're not going to remove that human right because we are a democracy. But people would be prevented from selling a deadly product to our future kids for those who are born after year 2000. It's a simple phase-out strategy. If we don't do something like this, well, there's going to be a lot more kids grow up and die of lung cancer, etc. But the other issue is the massive health liabilities that it's causing already and will cause in the future if we do not address this. We have to do something about it. That's one possible way for Australian voters to consider, will that help? How are we going to pay for most of our policies to put more money back into regional Australia and around Australia? Is we're going to run an efficient and productive government. There used to be a third world country not far from here, a tiny island state with very limited natural resources compared to Australia that has massive natural resources and a small population. And they're outperforming Australia now. You might be able to tell me what country I'm talking about. Tiny island state by the name of Singapore. Used to be a third world country, now a very rich nation and outperforming Australia. Why? Because they run efficient and productive government. Their government departments are run with private sector mentality, not with bureaucratic mentality. They run with KPIs, results-driven government. They have government-owned businesses that buy out a lot of our businesses. They're not run like our government businesses that waste money, are lazy and don't know how to run things. They run with efficiencies. This is how we're going to cut out wastage and billions of dollars to fund our policies, is let's make government departments efficient and super productive, run like the private sector. If we had that mentality in government departments across this country, we would save an absolute fortune. Number 14, increase the tax-free threshold to $22,500. This is for low-income earners. I believe, I'm not sure whether you agree with this, my belief is that excessive welfare is dangerous and has been very damaging to this country. We believe in a hand up, not a handout. And the way we're going to do this, let's incentivise lower income earners to earn more. Let's incentivise and help them earn more. Let's remove tax for anyone earning less than $22,500 per annum. So they don't have to pay any tax. Let's help them do better. Adding on to that, you raised the superannuation issue before. We removed tax contributions for low-income earners instead of having to pay 15%. We'd remove that for low-income workers so people can put their money aside for super. What we're talking about is that we're saying a clear message to the Australian government: leave your hands off super. This current team of Gillard and Swan, they're the ones that are after attacking your super. They want their hands on your super, but guess what? Julia Gillard is going to retire soon, okay? Forced retirement. She's going to retire at an equivalent of $8 million in super payouts. Wayne Swan will retire to $5.6 million in equivalent super. The two very people that want to get their hands on the surpluses in your super account to fund their budget black holes because they don't know how to manage money. It's absolutely appalling, and that's what they're going to retire to. Is that fair? It's absolutely ridiculous. Hands off super. Super is there so we fund our own retirement, so we don't have to rely on a pension that probably won't exist in the future. Look at ways to increase tax revenue. There are innovative ways. We talked about that before as an example of a visa tax. Lower the company tax rate. We have an uncompetitive tax rate. We can't compete with countries like Singapore that have 15% type tax rates. Ireland has 10% tax rates. Our tax rates are too high. For people that oppose the companies getting a lower tax rate, you got to understand, you charge too much tax, companies won't come here. Companies won't invest here. They'll go offshore. They'll grow here and move and get a lower tax rate. We live in a global economy. We have to accept that. What we're suggesting, rather than lower the tax rate straight away for the biggest companies, let's start with the small enterprises. What you've got to understand, and I'm sure you understand this, a pity Wayne Swan doesn't, but all job creation starts. Do governments create jobs or do the private sector create jobs? Tell me. Governments never create jobs. Governments take the tax revenue of businesses and you as employees or business owners, and then they spend that and employ people.
What about in Singapore? You just mentioned that they do create jobs.
With their private sector mentality, yeah, they help create jobs because they're actually operating as a business. So that's a good point. If we can get that mentality here, then they would be operating state-owned businesses. So what we do to start of a small business enterprise, if we're going to represent workers in this country, which 21st century Australia does represent the workers of this country, we have to support and have a supportive environment for small to medium businesses. More startup businesses. As a business can make a profit, can then employ people. Increases job creation. That's common sense. The more profit they can make, it leads to sustained pay rises for workers. So a party that suggests that they are for workers yet routinely attacks the business community is selling a lie. How can you protect workers' interests if you attack business, the very people that create jobs and need more profit to create sustained pay rises? Unions can demand continued pay rises, but there's a saying, don't be caught naked when the tide goes out. And what they're going to do is by continually pushing up excessive pay rises that industry can't afford, all they're going to do is cost people's jobs. And you ask many Australian workers, would you like your job or no job? Then they want their job. Because there's a lot of people overseas, as we know, will work for a hell of a lot less than Australians, that work harder and are often more skilled. Australian workers, yes, deserve pay rises on the condition they upskill themselves and add more value. As a country, we have very high labour. We have to be more productive and more efficient. Otherwise, there's some very hard lessons coming and we will be caught naked and the tide goes out. And greedy unions, we have to be aware of that because they have to look after industry. They can't be the enemy of industry. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. So let's look at lower tax rates such as 15% for small businesses, all the way tiered up to 28.5%. You can read about that in our policies. But would that stimulate small business? Would that help more startups? We also need to teach at school, business education as well. We need more entrepreneurs in our society. This is an interesting one. Provide Australia with value for money, NBN. Of course, we support a fast broadband network. There is no debate about that. Our question is, why don't we already have one? I was in China researching their fast broadband network. I mean, they're spending only $12 billion to deliver fast broadband to 500 million people. We're spending $42 billion and counting. It's more likely going to be $50, $60, $70 billion, and you're going to be waiting a long time. I know Armidale's getting a head start on the rest of the country. Going to be waiting a long time for this country to get something they should get much sooner. We want a fast broadband network faster and sooner, and we want it delivered for less cost than it can be. We don't want one that's going to be obsolete in the future as well with new technology coming. We need to be flexible with that and take advantage of new technologies as they come. We could believe we can save $15 to $20 billion in the current broadband network and deliver broadband faster, including into regional areas. That $15 to $20 billion that's saved, we want half that to go to regional Australia. So regional Australia should start looking and going, okay, we can have a fast broadband network sooner, plus we get billions of dollars in extra funding, which can go into health services, whatever else we need to put that money into. Let's get it happening sooner. Even in China now, they have faster broadband speeds than we have in Australia. Even in our capital cities, it's appalling. How slow it is in places. We need to get in the 21st century. This infrastructure should have been done a very long time ago. More water storage. 80% of our rainfall goes out to sea and is never used in northern Australia. Most of our rainfall is going out wasted, yet we're a dry continent. We need to be creative. Dams, etc., build prosperity. Northern Australia, we need to build a lot more dams. We need to look at channeling some of that water down into the drier parts of Australia. We need visionary projects like this. I know the extreme greens will jump up and down that dams are environmentally destructive. And dams can be built these days that are much more environmentally friendly. But I was thinking the other day, nature creates lakes. Is that true? Do the extreme greens want to go and drain all the lakes because that's effectively a dam? Lakes are there created by nature. It's no different to a dam. So we don't want to go and drain lakes because it might damage the environment. Lakes were created and change the environment. So really, we have to be a little bit more common sense with the environmental issues. Number 20, we propose the building of a high-speed rail network. I was checking this out in China, and they've built that in many parts of China. I wrote about this in my book a year ago. It's getting a lot more media coverage in recent times, you'd realise. We suggest a high-speed rail network is moving us into the 21st century. We need to have that. And even though it might cost $100 billion, it doesn't have to we don't have to spend all the money up front. We can start and be building phases and build over a period of time. Gold Coast to Brisbane should be one of the first places connected. Newcastle, Sydney, Canberra connected. Geelong, Melbourne, Bendigo, and eventually connect them all the way through. You'd then be able to travel from Sydney to Melbourne in 3 hours, about the same time it would take to fly. Time you go to the airport, check in, get it on a flight, get there to back to the cities, about the same time. It's environmentally friendly. And it would add great infrastructure to this country. I'm touching on that. Also, driving down from Glen Innes to Tamworth in the last few days, and obviously from Brisbane, we're saying, we're talking about we want policies where we invest in infrastructure ahead of time, just like China do. They build the infrastructure before they need it. In Australia, we build it well after we need it, which is part of the challenge. In this country, we have infrastructure like a railway network that goes all the way to the border and through to Brisbane. Yet we're not using it past Armidale. I mean, what's the point of investing and we built this infrastructure, we're not using it? Why isn't there a railway connected all the way that runs through Tamworth, Armidale, Glenelg, Tenterfield, all the way to Brisbane? It's already built. Yet we have to spend so much on New England roads that have been damaged by excessive trucks that were put onto the roads that were originally carted by rail. I know this has been an issue that's been looked at before, but there's been no progress done on it. And we want to look into that issue as a New England issue, because why are they going to spend billions on building a railway inland to connect Melbourne to Brisbane? We already have a rail network that runs straight through New England that should be connected to Brisbane. And then gauges that change at the border, fix it. Change the gauges all the way to Brisbane from the border. It's not very far. If Queensland won't help with that, the federal government should help with that. That way we connect Brisbane, Sydney via New England. And we can get a lot of the trucks off the road. That will reduce the cost of fixing New England roads, which means money is freed up to have better roads and safer roads. We're also talking about how many people have died as a result of all those trucks that have been put on the road. I believe the Carr government's responsible for this in the past because they refused to spend on infrastructure. For a party that claims they're the ones that invest in infrastructure, they don't have a very good track record. 21. We're almost there to 25, and we'll take some questions and see what you think. Turn Northern Australia into a special economic zone. I was talking to Gina Reinhardt recently about this. She's a big fan of this, and she's been pushing this. Gina Reinhardt gets a hard time in Australia, heavily criticised, but if you ever meet the woman, she's a very down-to-earth, a country woman that has a lot of common sense, and we're talking about the lack of common sense in this country. She's very passionate about this, and I'd rather listen to Gina Reinhardt than listen to Julia Gillard. Who has more influence and who's done more for this country out of those two women? I know who has. Gina Reinhardt's been voted one of the top 100th most influential people on the planet. She's one of the wealthiest women on the planet. She's the wealthiest person in this country. You don't get wealthy unless you know what you're doing. They say she inherited wealth. That's a load of garbage. She inherited 0.35% of her wealth. She's created her wealth, and she's added a lot of value to this country. Whether we like her or not is irrelevant. The point is that people like this need to be listened to ahead of our current Prime Minister. That really, what has she done for the country? Has she ever created wealth, created a job for this country? I'll tell you how Labor's created jobs if you want an interesting statistic. Labor claims they've created jobs, and we have an unemployment rate of only 5.6%, and that's really good compared to our other countries. They also tell you that our debt is good compared to other countries. They can, well, let's look at that. If you compare our Australian economy to basket case economies in Europe and Greece and Spain and Italy, yeah, you could say we're doing okay. But they didn't have a commodities boom to go through. We've gone through a commodities boom where we should have no debt. Now, argue we went through a credit crisis, we need to stimulate the economy. Yes, you need to stimulate the economy. Does that mean you need to waste $16 billion on school, building shade cloth sheds in schools that charged $1 million that can be built for $150,000? Where did all that money in between go? Into the hands of union companies, controlled companies, the pals of this current government. $16 billion wasted. When schools knew what they needed the money for, but they were dictated to, they had to build sheds that they don't even use in most cases, that did not add value to this country. How many other billions have been wasted? Running up this debt. If we had a dual-way highway from Sydney through New England to Brisbane with the money that could have been built by now, with the money that wasted, we wouldn't complain so much about being in debt, because being in debt for infrastructure is okay, because you get a return on that. But because we've got nothing to show for it, of course we're annoyed. Of course we feel appalled by this. So Labor, this current government, yes, has created 406,000 jobs since 2008. You know how they've created them? They've added 406,000 government jobs in managerial positions, in most cases to government, in government workers. Only 279,000 jobs have been created in the private sector since 2008 in the last 5 years. 406,000 have been created in the government sector. Think about it. If you're desperate for votes, if they paid most of these people on $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year, if I offered you $100,000 a year, would that increase the likelihood of you voting for me? But it's not my $100,000. I'm taking your taxpayers' money and giving to 406,000 people jobs. If we discounted that, they'll give you some statistics. The private sector in that time has only grown by 20%. Government jobs have grown by a massive 60%. We see in Queensland where Premier Newman's had to slash 14,500 workers, government workers, and he gets heavily criticised for that. Yet they don't talk about the 18,000 excess government workers that were added to the payroll in the previous government that weren't needed. That's why they had to do that. Yes, we need government workers and we need productive government workers, but we don't need a lot of fat cats that are sitting there taking a government job doing bugger all other than voting the current government back in because they're getting a handout. It's called government welfare. Those people should be employed, yes, employed in the private sector. Then we can grow the economy, and then we'll need more government jobs at a 20% increase to support the economy. But not sitting there, twiddling their thumbs, wasting taxpayers' money, and they'll argue improved services. I'll give you an example. Adding more people to an inefficient government department does not increase services. I can remember having bureaucrats in one of my companies in the past. We had 9 people working out one of our accounts departments. And they said they're so busy they can't keep up, we need more staff. Their solution was more staff. Now we should be able to lower the cost of health services. So what we also propose is most of the money is just going into reactionary health care. We need more money going into preventative health care. We need more money going to health education. A lot of these massive health liabilities are caused by poor diet, lack of health education, excessive alcohol, etc. We need to educate our kids at school about how to eat healthily. We need to educate society about it, and then we're not going to need as much money for health services. We also have technology. Technology can deliver better health services, and the National Broadband Network is part of that technology that can help deliver regional Australia better health services. One of our candidates in Melbourne is a doctor, and he's heading up research into this particular area. He's passionate with healthcare, and we'll deliver more policies as we get closer to September and in the future of how we can tackle and look at these problems, and in particular for regional Australia, which in particular needs more assistance because health services in regional Australia is often left behind. I know you've had some improvement in some money that's come your way in recent years, and I know Tony Windsor claims credit for the money that's been poured in the seat of New England by voting in Gillard, supporting Gillard. But I find that interesting because I'm sure the same amount of money would have come into New England if he had supported what the majority of voters in New England supported was the coalition government in the last election. So I don't think he can claim credit for that. I'm astounded, one of the reasons I'm running is because as a New England voter, I was overseas last time when I found out there was a hung parliament, and then we're waiting to see what Tony Windsor and Oakeshott would do, who they would support. And I thought, surely, I checked the statistics in New England. At the time, only 8% had voted for Labor. That meant 92% didn't. And I thought, well, that's a pretty easy decision for Tony Windsor, wouldn't you think? Just being re-elected to New England, and sure, re-elected as an independent, that's fine. How do I make a decision? Well, if only 8% of people want me to vote for Gillard, and the majority of people don't, then I should, out of integrity, support what the majority of New England voters wanted. I think that should be an easy decision. Now, of course, Tony will argue and say that he did the right thing. Let's give him a free pass on that if that's true. If he did the right thing, he thought Gillard was a better Prime Minister. After 3 years of Gillard as a better Prime Minister, let's judge him on that call. Because we have one of the most inept governments we've ever seen in the history, certainly since I've been alive. I can't comment before 1972, and many people, but those who can, one of the worst, and this is not just me, this is an opinion, but it's more than an opinion. Let's look at the polls. We have one of the most unpopular prime ministers in the history of the country, despite having one of the most unpopular opposition leaders in the history of the company. No wonder Australians are pretty unhappy about their choices. But I think these are fair questions, whether you're a Tony Windsor fan or not. I think you should ask him, why did you support Gillard if only 8% of the electorate wanted to go that way? Shouldn't you support what the majority wanted? That's what democracy is about. And a new political system, we'd want to change that the elected person can't go against the wishes of the electorate. What the electorate voted on is what should be the case. As a voter, that should be the case. Either you've made that decision, then you have to stand by that decision, and that decision is not looking very good. Now, to claim credit for the money that he's got for New England, well, he would have got the exact same money if he had to put the coalition. So I can't see how he can claim credit for that. So we'll let Tony defend his position, but I think there's a challenge there. Let's speak the truth. The reason he went Gillard is because he hates the National Party, he hates the coalition, and he had personal vendettas against them. That's one of the real reasons he did it. And that is for personal interests ahead of the New England electorate. So, and I know I've spoken to a lot of people in the New England electorate that want to see that change. I say, Tony, if you're not going to resign and do the honourable thing, same as Ms Gillard should resign and do the honourable thing, then sure, run in this seat for New England, hope to be re-elected, but run as a Labor candidate. So at least the voters this time can't be betrayed. Last time we could be excused for being betrayed because he didn't tell us he was a Labor candidate. He didn't tell us it was a hung parliament he was going to go that way. But this time we know he's a Labor candidate. So run as a Labor candidate so at least people can't be betrayed a second time. But we know if he did run as a Labor candidate in 2010, would he have been elected as the MP? We know what the answer is to that. So yes, I have a few issues, and those issues have been reflected heavily in the seat of New England, and that's one of the reasons why I chose to run in New England as well, apart from the fact that I spent most of my life here, but we need to see change. Number 23, we're almost there. Overhaul dole payments. We don't believe in excessive welfare after 90 days of being on the dole. You should either, if you can't find a job, you should go and study. You'll be paid free courses and continue to be paid the equivalent. But you should either be studying or working, basically, if you're not retired, and adding value to society. Getting money for nothing is debilitating, reduces self-esteem. We all know that. But it buys votes to give out welfare, and we don't support that. We're not going to buy votes. We're going to share with people how it is, and it's up to the voters to decide what's the best way to go. And most voters, I think, are highly intelligent if given the choices and can make the right decisions for this country. 24, new technology for schools. We would equip every student, every teacher with an iPad or similar tablet. We'd bid off with Apple or Samsung, etc., to get the best rate. It's not an expensive policy. But why aren't we using leading-edge technology? It's shown with students, with classes that have been using iPads, that troublesome students, poor students that have been struggling, are now fully engaged and become great students. They're often poor students or troublesome students because they're bored out of their brains in a 19th century education system that we're all asked at school, sitting there when we're studying trigonometry or algebra, how is this going to help us later in life? How is this going to help us get what we want in life? We must make education relevant, fun, interesting, and kids go into school at 5 years of age, creative, intelligent little beings. They usually come out less creative and less intelligent and unable to think for themselves. We need creativity to succeed in today's world. Yes, in the industrialisation era, you needed to teach conformity, follow the rules, because we needed workers for factory production lines predominantly, where you didn't want too much creativity on a production line. You didn't want people going, oh, let's not put the nut on here today, let's put something else on. No, you didn't want that. Today, though, you need creativity. We need critical thinkers. Education is the key to success and abundance and prosperity. That is my skill set, that is my expertise, and we will push a very strong education platform in this country. Last but not least, government transparency of taxes. What we want is honest, transparent government. We're not pushing for power to have power. We're the only political party that wants to get power to give the power back to voters. And give the power back in the hands of the voters where it should be. And if we're going to have a true democracy, that's how it should be. Transparency of taxes. In other words, when you go fill up your car with fuel, the docket should print out and show you exactly how much per litre is going to taxes, state and federal taxes. If you buy a house, it should be printed out in the contract how much is all the taxes. If you buy a car, you should see how much is all the taxes. Why are we paying 2 to 3 times more in Australia for cars and most other products or services? That needs to be addressed. And taxes is a big reason of that. By declaring all the taxes, it puts a lot more pressure on government to get rid of the inefficient and hidden taxes. And consumers can see how much you're paying in tax outside your PAYG tax or outside your company tax. It would be a more fairer, transparent government. So that's our 25 ways. Let me cover quickly on how this will help with New England and what are some of the issues. Then we're going to take a short 2-minute break. We can have a chat and we're going to then moderate, ask some questions, and then we'll wrap up. Okay. Let's just go quickly, relate some of the New England issues. These are some of the things that I've identified as some of the key issues. You can add to these, of course. I'm here to listen to see what are some of the more specific issues. Obviously, health services in regional Australia is a big issue, and we have to continue to look at that. What we're suggesting is that most governments think just throwing more money at a problem is the solution. But if you have an inefficient system, throwing more money at it's not going to fix it. You need to get the system efficient and productive and eliminate the wastage first. So let's say the health budget for let's say for New England, the health budget. If we could remove the inefficiencies and wastage, then without a single extra dollar, we could deliver better health services. Does it make sense? Before we go asking for Canberra for more money. Let's fix the system first, deliver better value and more services, and then add to that more funding. Does it make sense? That's the only common sense solution. Continuing to waste and have inefficient systems is just wasting money. Throw more money down the sinkhole. It's not going to solve the problems, just like Gonski is not going to solve the problems. You watch. Are we going to have a dramatically improved education system? I doubt it. Rising crime levels are a concern. I know many people express this. We want to keep, country living is about having quality of life. And we do have quality of life in New England, but we don't want to see that eroded. We want to see it continually improved, and there is some issues in that area. I was speaking to some of the detectives that come to some of the events the last few nights, and they're highlighting, Jamie, how you talk about the 19th century for our political system. The same thing could be said about our judicial system. They're very frustrated. They lock up the criminals, or they get the criminals arrested, but they can't get them thrown in jail because they get out on bail, and it's so hard to convict people because the system is outdated. So they want to see changes there so they can be more effective at protecting the community. Falling education standards, we talked about that. Poor quality roads and lack of infrastructure. I mean, I drive on New England roads, and especially in regional areas out to the farms, etc. They've gone backwards. The amalgamation of local governments has not increased services. You might have noticed that. It's increased bureaucracy. It's increased more people paid on high salaries that stand around and watch other people potentially work. Many people say they work for the government. They might be employed by the government. There's a big difference between employed and working for the government. There's a lot of inefficiencies. We have to fix that. Coal seam gas. The media makes this out to be a major issue. It might be more of an issue in Tamworth, but in Armidale and Glen Innes and those areas, obviously it doesn't really relate to that. But I'm happy to take any questions on that later. Big issue for New England is obviously live export cattle sales to Indonesia that this current inept government totally killed and destroyed. That is now really hurting beef producers. I'm a beef producer. I know how much prices are down because the cattle from Northern Australia is now being flooded down to these markets. Cattle prices have dropped. What we want is compensation. The current government totally stuffed up and killed the live export market to Indonesia, so they're responsible for that. Pay compensation to the farmers that are suffering as a result of that. There's no other excuse. Then we need to get rid of the bureaucrats. We need to get people with private sector mentality in these departments and sell our exports, fix up these problems and have better sales of our products. That's how you create a better prosperity for a country. I mean, we're talking common sense here. It can be done and should be done. Old age care is a growing burden, especially in regional areas with a higher percentage of population. We have aged care, and we talked about the rail network as well. Solutions are eliminate the wastage at all three levels, use technology I talked about, more funding, etc. More use of 457 visas to bring in more skilled workers in healthcare, particularly in aged care where there's not enough workers available. There's a lot of immigrants that would come to this country that would happily relocate to regional areas, which stimulate the economy but can help in meeting the shortfall in healthcare services. So that's only a good thing for the country. By voters having more say directly on policy would lead to better policy for voters. MBN savings, we talked about there's a potential $7.5 to $10 billion that could be directed from savings to regional Australia and still deliver a faster broadband network. Sovereign Wealth Fund will help lower the dollar. It's not the only solution, but it can help with that. That will help regional Australia. Better Managed Australia would free up more resources for regional Australia. As I mentioned, better marketing the region's commodities by having people that can deliver results in those areas. Better marketing the region to attract more industry to the region will create more jobs. I mean, this is just how you've got to go out in the private sector. You've got to do that in and outside of government. How do we attract more businesses to this area? How do we stimulate more businesses? That will lead to job creation. That's been my expertise. I'm not a career politician. I have been out there and done it in a dozen companies myself. I've also worked with over 500,000 people, mostly Australians, and I've helped them create more abundance in their life, changing their thinking and being more results-driven and more focused and more educated. These are things that anyone can apply, and we need to apply them to government. Innovating new taxes to generate more revenue for regional Australia. Also, we want to suggest Australia cannot, with the rising population, we're talking 36 million projected for the year 2050 from 23 million people today. That will actually, the governments don't tell you the truth, it's going to be a lot more than 36 million people. It'd be more like 40, 45 million people by the year 2050. Where are we going to fit all these people? Sydney's already overcrowded. Melbourne can take some more. We need to de-urbanise Australia. We need to move more people into regional centres, which will only stimulate the economies of cities like Tamworth and Armidale, Bendigo, Ballarat, Toowoomba, and these cities can grow and prosper and they have a better quality of life in the country. And many immigrants moving to a country would rather live in regional Australia because it is a better quality of life. So this can lead to a future for New England where we do see some sustained increases and growth and better prosperity if it's managed in the right way and has to be properly managed. Other things there that we talked about. Also, we want to borrow for infrastructure if needed, key infrastructure. There's nothing wrong with borrowing for money as long as it's good debt. Bad debt like this current government's done is no good. Good debt's fine. We can improve infrastructure. Let's look at fixing the railway line and have it connecting to Brisbane if that's a viable thing. I can't see why it wouldn't be. Let's look at getting a dual-way free highway from Sydney all the way through to Tamworth at least and speed that up. Let's not just have all the money spent on the Pacific motorway. It's great they're doing, but the money that's being wasted, we could free that money up and get a dual highway all the way through and eventually connect all the way through to Brisbane through the New England. That will only improve our roads, etc. And these things are possible if we can run an efficient government and free up money that's being wasted. $16 billion wasted in the Burr program, how many billions in the BATS program. All this money could have been freed up and you could have had a dual-way highway by now from that. Very quickly, pretty much that's the key issue. So here's what I want you to do. Take a 2-minute break, then we're going to open up for questions. We'll go for questions 10, 15 minutes, then we'll wrap up. While you're having a break, what I want to ask you to consider doing is you would have these postcards here. We certainly, to create these changes, we do need support. If you've seen any ideas, even one idea tonight that can improve Australia, then we ask you to consider becoming a member of 21st Century Australia. It's free to join as a member. Of course, you're welcome to also make a donation, but we do need voter support. We cannot be voters that complain about the lack of choice and complain about Gillard and not overly happy about Abbott. If we just complain and do nothing about it, then we support the status quo and nothing will change. If, though, we're going to be supportive, even if it's only a third party to keep the two major parties honest, then I believe that's a step in the right direction. If it's only support a third party that will create innovative policies, we don't care which party uses our policies. Good luck to them who use it. We just want to see policy change. We're not about power, we're about change.